Abuja at 2:58 p.m. on that fateful day of Sunday, 3rd June 2012, and was cleared for a flight level FR 260. 17 minutes into the flight, the crew noticed something abnormal going on with the left engine. The two pilots, as captain and the first officer, engaged in a discussion over the attitude of the left engine. The first officer asked the captain if he should call the flight engineer to analyze the problem. They had a flight engineer on board, and the diligent first officer asked his boss, the captain, if they should call the man in to come and give them analysis of what was going on. But the captain turned down the suggestion, insisting these were all captured in the black box, or those black boxes that even though they
which is actually pink in color,
orange,
orange.
Usually orange in color, but known in aviation circles as black boxes, right? The captain turned down the suggestion, insisting they could solve the problem without involving the flight engineer. As the flight continued to Lagos, the pilots further noticed that there were differences on the engine pressure ratio. I'm going to explain that to you, Joe. This engine pressure ratio is a way of determining the engine thrust, and what it simply means is when you get the pressure coming out of the exhaust and divide it by the pressure at the point of entry into the compressor. You remember when I taught you about the jet engine, being in three compartments, major compartments, and then of course the gaseous air that get off the exhaust is under high pressure, and by action and reaction, equal and opposite, the Newton's second law of motion, those poles are tearing away forward, and because they are attached to the body of the aircraft strongly and permanently, they take the airplane along. And of course, aerodynamism with all the movement of movable plates will give you your banking, your yaw, dipping down and up. That's what happens.
So the second pilot or first officer discovered that difference.
Yes, because his captain was overheard, in a black box. When he pulled the power, the throttle to a particular position, he was supposed to give them a particular reading on the panel. Showing you the performance of the engine, and then when his co-pilot announced what was reading there, the man said, an indication that something was wrong. And so the engine was already distressed. That's when this EPR thing came on, and I thought I should really let you understand what the engine pressure ratio is all about. It's just that pressure that is pushing out from the exhaust divided by the measured pressure at the point of intake into the compressor. When it gets into the compressor now pressurizes the gaseous air, and then the turbine sends them out through the exhaust. And of course, action and reaction, equal and opposite. The pole tears away with high thrust, of course dragging the airplane at a speed of almost 800 to 850 kilometers an hour. Awesome. That's how it works. And so let's continue, because time is not our friend. As the flight continued to Lagos, the pilots further noticed that there were differences on the engine pressure ratio value on the engines. The left engine was soon declared inoperative by the pilots, as it was not responding to advancement of the throttle lever. Although this situation required the pilots to take a look at their quick reference handbook, usually known as QRH, and follow appropriate procedures, the pilots strangely failed to do so, because at that point they were supposed to have made a quick reference to their quick reference handbook to know what to do under the circumstance. That also was ignored. Clip 6, quickly, please. The crew commenced an early descent towards Lagos without consulting either the QRH, that's the quick reference handbook, or the flight engineer. They didn't even invite the flight engineer who was on board to come and take a look and help them determine the next step.
The pilot kicked against that when...
Yeah, that's correct. The captain
suggestion.
That's correct. The captain further instructed the first officer to increase the rate of descent. That also was a mistake of the flight, but the first officer rejected the instruction, insisting they were safer maintaining a gradual descent in order to maintain their height. If you listen to the conversations of the captain and his first officer, you just find out that they should have switched places. The first officer sounded, like a more professional, like a sound,
and relaxed.
Yes, pilot than his boss. Than his boss, the captain. And of course, stories that went as we go on in other parts. You hear other stories that went on with the young man that was employed by Dana. All the things that happened in the United States of America and how he was dispossessed of his license and the rest of them. Those are stories that you hear in the future as we go on with this awesome topic.
And then he came here, we employed him.
That's correct. Without checking out his past and stuff like that. Lagos Air Traffic Control ATC cleared the crew for an approach to runway 18 left. The crew, however, preferred an approach to runway 18 right and was cleared for that approach. At 3:31 p.m., the crew declared that the two engines were not responsive to throttle. They lost both engines at exactly 3:31 p.m. They were not responsive to throttle movements. In spite of this grave situation, no emergency call was issued by the crew. Because at that point, you expected them to do their usual Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. And then announce, exactly what was going on. So that emergency steps will be taken to await either land crashing or some kind of
just to pass out an information.
That's correct. No, that's right. That information didn't go out. When they even discovered that they even went ahead to announce to the passengers they were about to land, and passengers were hoping, oh, thank God, we will soon be down there, not knowing that death, an unfortunate one, an unnecessary one, was waiting for them. Now, clip 7, please. Sensing grave danger, the captain took over control from of the aircraft from his first officer. Apparently, the first officer was in charge. Remember what I told you, that what happens on the left or the cockpit happens simultaneously on the right. So you can actually fly the airplane from any side. The captain can be in charge flying while the first officer gives him the course, and vice versa. So the first officer can fly. And so at that day, another point, the first officer who sounded more intelligent and more professional was actually the one flying. But then the captain took control when there was this total emergency, and then he took steps that messed everybody up. Listen to it. Now, the captain took over control of the aircraft from his first officer. The crew, in a bid to put the situation under control, switched off several systems of the plane's engines. At 3:35 p.m., the flight voice recorder heard the captain, stating that they will be investigated by NCAA. The captain stated to his first officer that they will be investigated by NCAA. An indication he knew something terribly and unacceptable. Something terrible and unacceptable had been allowed to happen. As ATC, that is the air traffic control, issues several instructions of headings and radar vectors, the gravity of the situation became clearer to the crew. The crew began their pre-landing tasks, which included air brakes, flaps, and sleighs deployment. All these deployments necessitated thrust to continue the final approach. And the thrust, Joe, they didn't have any more, because at that point they had lost 2 engines and were simply gliding. Clip 8, very quickly, clip 8, so that we can have 1 minute of final discussion before we put it on air today. At 3:41 p.m. and just 11 nautical miles, an equivalent of 20 kilometers to the airport. Oh God, people that had reached their destination. The crew decided to declare an emergency on flight 992 when it was absolutely messy. Everything had gone bad, no thrust, and all the mistakenly deployed flaps and slates has further slowed down the aircraft.
Everything, all the systems have stopped working.
Yeah. So, as a matter of fact, if that guy had understood this awesome machine called the airplane, when you had lost your engines was not the time to deploy your flaps, because flaps further slow you down. Even though they keep you, they give you air pressure to keep you suspended, for smooth, touchdown. But on that, situation where you had no engines, you struggle.
So for what you are saying, if the flap were left the way they were,
yeah,
the disaster wouldn't have been so.
It probably would have cleared those buildings. The plane probably would have been high enough to clear those buildings until, final approach to the runway where you have shrubs,
yes,
and maybe small trees and stuff like that.
Or even on the runway.
Or even on the runway, you could have a hard drop that could still, some lives would have been saved. And if announcement had been made and the fire trucks had surrounded the entire runway awaiting for whatever, they probably would have put out the fire and half of the passengers might have been saved. So that pilot behaved most unprofessionally. Had he left that airplane in the control of his first officer, who continued to resist instructions he was giving him and took the right decision until he eventually took over control and messed up everything. Anyway, here we are. Let's quickly conclude. The crew decided to declare an emergency on flight 992, repeatedly announcing dual engine failure, negative response from throttles. The situation became increasingly hopeless by the seconds as the altitude warning sounded, indicating that the aircraft was sinking dangerously into the terrain. Remember, he had deployed flaps, deployed slates, and slowed down the aircraft, yeah, when he had no engine thrust. That was silly. Shouldn't happen. Concluding, 25 seconds later, the MD-83 crashed into a crowded neighborhood near the airport, landing on its tail, which completely detached from the rest of the aircraft. The plane exploded into a huge inferno, consumed by its 8,000 pounds of fuel. It still had fuel, on board. And so when he made that, impact on that 3-story building, the tail broke off, fell aside completely, and then went with passengers, and fire consumed everyone, and the bubble burst.
That's part 2, the bubble burst, part 2. Well, of course, discussion has been with your #1 aviation freak. We'll be looking at the bubble burst, complete story of the Dana crash that happened on June 3rd, 2012.
That's correct.
Well, that is the second, analysis of what has happened.
Yeah, part 2.
Part 2.
We'll be doing part 3 on Monday.
And then and all of that. Now, so far from what we have learned from you, from part 1 down to the part 2 that you just concluded, what becomes of, the airline, looking at what NCAA is supposed to do? Because my concern is with the NCAA.
That's correct.
Yes, because
that's
correct. Supposed to be on ground to, of course, take note of the flight schedule for takeoff, and if of course, they are airworthy.
Joe, aviation is such a serious-minded business. It's such an organized, sector that so much that the human operators must be so thoroughly trained that they should know that, hey, we have human lives on our hands. No room for compromises.
Now, another thing is on the part of the pilot, which, some time ago you talked about. In Nigeria, and we take a quick break. When we come back, it shall be time to look at cryptocurrency. Stay with us.